Shalom and welcome to another edition of our Daily Bread. I'm Messianic Torah, and this week's Parashat is the 12th and final Parashat of the book of Bereshit, also called Genesis, and it's called Vayechi, which means, and he lived. This week's Parashat starts in Genesis or Bereshit 47:28 through 50:26, and the Haftorah is in 1 Kings or Aleph Melech 2:1 through 2:12. And this is my summary message, which is a summary of the full message called Looking Ahead for Parashat Vayechi 2014-15. This is a 10-minute message just summarizing what I go into more detail in the full message, and the link to the full message should be below. So, my message is called Looking Ahead. In this week's Parashat, we see that it's Yaakov's time. It says his time to die drew near. Okay, this is how it opens up. And it's a couple interesting things. Obviously, it's super interesting that this parashat means and he lived, and really it's talking about how he's going to die. And so we've seen that before with Sarah's life, and it's really about Sarah's death. And that should raise a question and cause you to wonder what that means and what's significant. In the first point, my first point is about life and death, because that's how they're connected. It's the ability to look forward as you're about to die, say you're getting older, and look back on your life, as people many times do, and they're reflective and they think about everything, and then they look forward. And then that same model is encompassed in children, that children are kind of a way of looking into the future, because as you die, they're what's going to carry the baton, so to speak, forward for you. And so a lot of this parasha is about Yaakov giving blessings, looking at his children, telling them what's going to happen to him in the future. He's taking a look at the trajectory and telling them, here's where you're going to be further out. And he's able to see more behind than they are, because he's older and wiser. And when we see this concept of sons, the next point I talk about is the sons. And that's really being able to, when he says that he didn't think he would see Yosef's face and now he's seen his seed also. It's about that surety, and how can a person rest in peace? How can Yaakov rest in peace? It's one thing to see your son and to know that he's alive and he's going to be okay. And it's another thing to see his son's saying that he's not only alive, he's already got sons that are going to go on. And that allows you to extend your look into the future. And if the future looks good, you can then rest assured knowing the future looks good. It's like having money in the bank account. If you can look and say, well, I've saved up and I've done this and now I have this, just as it talks about the ant who takes crumb by crumb all summer long, so that they're prepared with this big mound of food that will carry them over in the winter time. When they see that big mound, they know, okay, just like Yosef, he can see this 20% of the grain that he saved up during the 7 good years, and he can look at that big store of grain, as it says it was more than to be numbered, and know that, okay, a famine is coming, but I can rest more secure knowing that the famine's coming, but we do have food set aside, already prepared for that. And this concept of looking ahead, is that we look ahead so that we can do today the things that will ensure and reduce risks and ensure that we're going to be okay in the future. And that model is typified really in what it means to be a parent. That when you teach your children, when you spend your waking hours, your living hours preparing them, then you know that when you die, that they've grown into good people who are going to be obeying God and all this and carrying them on, so that all your work isn't going to diminish in vain, that they'll be good. And that's the way you want to die. You want to die. And there's blessings and it's given in the scriptures when it talks about, well, you're going to die at an old age and full of years, and you're going to see your children's children, and that's a blessing, described in the Torah. And so that's what we're really looking at here. Next we talk about trajectory and wisdom, and this is really about studying, like the difference between, children don't know what they don't know. And that person who's old, he's not only lived his whole life and then learned from his father, And he's able to take all of that, just like we are with the Torah. We're able to read these stories of people who went before us. We're not a blank slate that has to start over every generation. We carry this information and we push it into ourselves. And then we get it out of ourselves and put it into our children. That's the inheritance, so that they have something to give to their children, so that all this knowledge of the people who've interacted with God is pulled from the past and pushed into the future and refined and refined and refined, so that it's never forgotten. Because each generation then, who's further away from the starting point, if we look at those, like bloodlines, like years, right? Because wisdom a lot of times comes from years. So if we look at that and we say, well, Avraham could only give his life and knowledge of God, which was then not that deep, to Yitzhak. Yitzhak could take everything he learned and experienced with God, plus what he learned from his father about what his father experienced with God, and put even more into Yaakov. And Yaakov could take all of that and put it into his sons. And now we have the Torah. And the Torah is that bloodline, that knowledge and that wisdom that's come all the way. And everybody's added to it in each story, and Chronicles and Judges and prophets, and all that has been, and then we get all of that. Before the books of Ezekiel were written, everyone before that got only the scriptures up to that point, and then they get more, and then more goes to the next person. And look at us now. We have the New Testament. We have all that. We have so much more inheritance and so much more that's been given to us, that what we should be producing and giving forward should be even greater. And that's our responsibility, being on this end, right? We've been given more. It's just like the parable of the talents. And we should have more that we give to our kids. So it also shows you how grievous it is of a sin to not diligently teach your children. It says in the Torah that the covenant was made with Avraham because God made the covenant with him because he knew he would diligently teach his children. Like, that's a major statement, and so many people look past that. But it's like, hey, the responsibility is, if all that knowledge comes up there and then falls, that last person who drops the baton's like a relay race, right? Everybody's running, and then they pass it off, and then they're in the lead, and okay, then they get behind, but then they come back. That last person who finally has the lead and drops the baton and loses the race ruined the work of everybody before them. That's why that last position is so important. Okay? And that's how it is being a parent. Then we talk about, and that's how important it is to learn the Torah and to take all that so that you can have it first, so then you can put it in your kids. And that's looking ahead. Next we talk about the interaction of people, events, that it's not just about you, right? Because it's not just you in that example. You're not living your own life. You're supposed to be honoring your Father. You're supposed to learn His will, and that's both your heavenly Father and your earthly Father, and then be able to extract that, put it into yourself, pay attention, and then you're supposed to move that on, into your children. So there's a responsibility there. Here we also see all the blessings, and we see all this, which is looking at the trajectory, helping them see further out, because He has the wisdom of everything He's brought before us, what He's given to them, and then even pointing forward. If you only have one data point and then another one going up, you started here and it went here. Now you don't know if the next one's going to keep going up or it's going to go down. You don't have enough data, but if you saw 5 going up in this direction, you can guess that the 6 is going to be there. If you had 100 going in one way, you can really be more and more sure about where it's going, and that's the trajectory. And when we learn the Torah, the more we know about it, the easier it is to discern and to understand harder things and other things in the Torah, because we have all those points plotted out. We get to the last part of this, and we see that Joseph's, what I call old thinking, we get this concept of his brothers worrying that Joseph is going to, after their father dies, he's going to kill them. And so they tell him that their father wanted him to forgive him. Well, then understand, Joseph is a true son. He's not just acting that way and then he's going to change when his Father dies. He's not putting on a show. This is who he is, and you can look back at all the things he's done and know that's who he is, and you can look forward and know what he's going to do. They totally missed the boat. They had backwards thinking. They had non-son-like thinking. You see, when you do what's right, it plots out the point, and it's not fake, and you're not being two-faced like they were, where they were telling their father, hey, something happened to Joseph, but meanwhile they were what happened to Joseph, and they were lying. So they didn't learn after his death. That just highlights the importance of what happens after death. When somebody's an influence, when your father is there to correct you and do all that. If he didn't do his job, then you don't know what's going to happen after he's gone. Could be something totally different. But if he did his job and you were doing your job as a son and doing his will, then when he dies, nothing should change. And that is looking ahead. If you want the full 1 hour message, check out the link below. And this is Shalom.